where the unwashed, where the workers of Petrograd and Moscow were actually taking over, where they were actually taking over the land, the labor, the technology, and the resources of their country, where communists were coming in to power. And there's a remarkable correspondence between Secretary of State Lansing and President Woodrow Wilson, in which Lansing says, the Bolsheviks are wanting in political virtue. They would preach to the ordinary man that he might elevate himself through political means rather than by dint of hard work. This would be a most unfortunate example to the common man in our country and other countries. They understood what was the threat. The Americans themselves, the American ruling class, had very little cap, didn't have all that much. I told you about Hoover and a few other speculators, other people like that. But they joined in with 14 other nations to invade the Soviet Union, to overthrow the socialist government that had just been put in after the Tsar was overthrown. That process of invading a revolutionary country is still happening before our eyes. If you want to understand those years after the Russian Revolution, just look at what's going on in Nicaragua. Invasion, either by directly with troops from your own country, or by using surrogate troops, and they use the white armies and the white generals.
I'll unmute for the ad break. When Parenti says in the beginning there, like, it's just right away bars with you don't go to poor countries to exploit them to get richer. These countries are rich, the people are poor because of imperialism, because of colonialism, because of capitalism. And it's right. Why would we call these countries poor, but then be so heavily invested in resource extraction? I think, yeah, it's time to start. Have a potion of animal speaking.
Dead drow, publicly displayed. The Dwagar are sending a message.
We need. What care we for his business here? He keeps us small, keeps us contained. We should be with the spider.
You've read that Father His spiders are loyal to the
Santa.
I've heard the vet.
Heard him. We're ready. We follow.
We have pet spiders still. I saved them. 160 XP. Nice. Well on our way to level 5, comrades. So after level 5 fighter, we're going to switch over to taking levels 6, 7, 8, and 9 in rogue. And we're going to do thief rogue, which will give us 2 bonus attacks, which means that at level 5 fighter and level 3 rogue, so as soon as level 3 rogue, so we'll be turned on completely by level 8, which will be in Act 2. Once we're level 3 rogue and level 5 fighter, we'll have 2 main hand attacks and 2 offhand attacks for a total of 4 attacks with our offhand weapon included. We have the dual wielding feat, meaning that we add all of the bonuses. So I think that we should be alright with 4 attacks for a lot of these fights. But again, we won't be there. We're gonna have 3 attacks until we get to level 3 rogue. I forgot to pick up a dwarf. These ones... The ones in the corner over here, I have a hard time picking up, so I usually just let them vanish. They like run away out of the Grimforge once you do their talk, and then you have to poison the 2 up top. It's really easy, but Murmath is annoying. he does the thing where like wandering around makes him like unselect. Oh, accidentally canceled. Oh, he didn't come. See, Murmath is annoying. He is over here.
No one drugs with clan flame shade.
Orb is suspicious. Oh, I forgot to put the ads over. I'll put the lecture back on now.
Don't get your butt in a twist. They're starting to rot.
The White Guard armies. Embargoes, isolation, withholding food supplies, sabotage, encirclement, refusing diplomatic recognition. These are the methods that are used, and these are the methods, time-honored methods, that are being used right now by Reagan against another revolutionary government, which is Nicaragua. That process, this water has ice cubes in it that float right down your throat. That process of encirclement and destabilization continued right until World War II. On the eve of World War II, Foreign Minister of the Soviet Union named Litanov went to, did I pronounce his name correctly? No, I can't say it that way. Went to the Western powers and called for an alliance with England, the United States, and France against Nazi Germany. And that if the Germans attacked Czechoslovakia, they would all join in, or attack Poland, or attack anybody, that all the powers would join in to fight Hitler and contain him. The Western allies refused those overtures from the Soviet Union. Not because they were appeasers, not because they were simple and naive, quite the contrary, because they had a plan of their own, and that plan was Munich. And the plan was, we give Hitler Czechoslovakia and he goes east. And they were waiting for a war, and that war was supposed to come, and it was going to be Nazi Germany finishing off Bolshevik Russia. Just as they had sent armies in against Russia just a few years, less than a decade before, so they now plan to do the same. And so they've done again and again. And that war was fought, and most of it was fought on the Eastern Front. 7 out of every 10 German soldiers who died in that war died on the Eastern Front. The scale of fighting was enormous. The battles of Kursk, Stalingrad, the Battle of Berlin. There's nothing like it that happened in the Western theater, on the Western Front. In the Battle of Berlin, you saw 2 million German soldiers against 3.5 million attacking Soviet soldiers. The losses were stupendous. But at the end of that war, the Soviet Union emerged as a major power, very weakened, very much weakened, having lost most of its industries west of the Urals, having lost 20 million people. Most of its transportation, by the way, at that time was still by horse or oxen in most areas for most of its population, but it still had the Red Army. And yet it was not an army that had any intention of marching through Europe, although that was a NATO myth that was cultivated at the time. And there's an interesting set of documents that just came out in the American Historical Review, which point out now that the West and the State Department never really believed that the Soviets were going to invade Western Europe. That was a myth which they consciously propagated. They knew that after an exhausting war, the last thing the Russian people would ever go for, or the Russian leaders themselves would ever go for, was another war. There was no sense, they had no interest in such a war. The war they fought against Germany was defensive, and they wanted to rebuild their country. That was a myth that was consciously propagated, that if we don't stop them, if we don't build NATO, if we don't double, triple, quadruple our defense forces, the Ruskies will be marching under the Arc de Triomphe. The point of all of what I've said so far is just to point out to you that the Cold War did not begin in 1947, but it began in 1917. that the Cold War has been going on even before the Russian Revolution, in the sense that the U.S. has been consciously, and other Western countries have been consciously suppressing any kind of revolutionary forces. When Ronald Reagan says that we've got to stop the Sandinistas and overthrow them because they are an extension of Soviet power, we might ask ourselves, we've been in Nicaragua 11 times, and at least 5 of those times there was no Soviet Union. We've invaded Costa Rica, we've invaded Haiti, we've invaded Mexico, and there wasn't the Soviet Union. We invaded these countries long before there was a Soviet Union. It's not that they're surrogates of the USSR, but that they are developing revolutionary movements which will bring a competing social order, one that will use the land, the labor, the resources, technology, and capital in a different way, for social need, communally, for nonprofit, public sector development, rather than for private capital accumulation. This would mean the death of capitalism, of that class with its power and privileges, with life as they love it, and hold it, and will fight tooth and nail to defend it. As Mrs. Bush said, we enjoy our wealth. The U.S. empire at the end of World War II replaced Britain. The Brits were eased out of Iran. British oil companies were replaced by American oil companies. British sugar companies in Honduras were eased out by American sugar companies. And America also picked up the tab. America built a basis, an American empire, over 2,000 bases around the world, including about 300 major ones. American fleets are on every ocean. American planes fly the skies over every continent, almost. And so we see enormous investment in the third world, and with that enormous investment since World War II, an enormous growth in poverty. Now that's unusual, and that really goes against the accepted ideology, which is that attract investments in here because that'll bring prosperity and jobs, all that sort of thing. But what investment has brought to Haiti is the immiseration of the small Haitian farmers. What investment has brought in Latin America and most other countries has been the displacement of the peasantry, their proletarianization. They're being thrown into shanty towns to suffer poverty wages or chronic underemployment. What investment has brought with it also is increasing illiteracy, sickness, disease, poverty, and a dislocation and disfranchisement. A growing foreign debt and indebtedness, growing investment for cash crops. By the way, that's what the whole Mexican Revolution was about. Was the land going to belong to the Mexicans so they could grow beans and alfalfa and feed their people? Or was the land going to belong to the big sugar companies and latifundio owners so they could grow sugar to export as a cash crop to make more money, to yet make more money, or coffee or whatever else? And with that growth, with that investment comes a dislocation in the structure of the third world country, so that the whole infrastructure of it gets built around capitalist extraction, capital extraction. The economist Ray Brown, when he went to Cuba before the revolution, it was in 1958, he was there about a year or so before, was impressed by how every major road he saw went from a sugar plantation to a refinery to the seaport. While there were whole communities without roads, that couldn't get to doctors, that couldn't have schools, couldn't see a priest, the sugar companies had their roads. And when you send foreign aid to those countries, 9 out of 10 of those dollars goes to build the infrastructure, to subsidize the capital investment of the private corporations, or to pay for the police and the army of that country, not to defend it from foreign invasion, because Uruguay is not going to invade Bolivia, because Taiwan isn't going to be invaded by the Philippines. But they need those big armies to defend their rulers from their own people, because those people are in such a state of immiseration. So that's where our foreign aid goes. And as someone once said, foreign aid is when the poor people, that's us, of a rich country give money to the rich people of a poor country.